Hello, 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 and thank you for joining Ask Miss Jai live. Today we will be talking about 5 ways that you can support transgender and non-binary veterans in the services that you provide. So stick around and learn a little bit about trans veterans and ways that you can support trans veterans. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Miss Jai. If you are catching this live, go ahead and put a hashtag live in the comments. Let me know, ask questions in the comments. Let me know what you find interesting. If you're catching this on the replay, go ahead and do a hashtag replay. And also share, tell us what you find the most fascinating about the topic that we're talking about today, which is supporting trans and non-binary veterans. Like I said, my name is Miss Jai. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns. I am the host of Ask Miss Jai Live. I have a background in trans and non-binary health and wellness, and have spent over the last decade in supporting trans and non-binary people, as well as people in public health settings in both prevention and in care. So I'm very excited to be here and to be talking about an often underserved community in our services, which is transgender veterans. So the reason that Ask Miss Jai Live got started was to provide support to health providers and public health officials and public health staff around how to best support trans and non-binary people. And part of that includes supporting trans and non-binary people who hold intersecting identities. And we know that veterans experience disproportionately high rates of homelessness, disproportionately high rates of suicidal ideation, PTSD, sexual violence, and we know that trans and non-binary people also experience disproportionately high rates of all of these kinds of harms as well. And so when we are working with folks who are at the intersection of trans identity and veteran status, then we are working with folks who exponentially experience those things at disproportional rates compared to cisgender non-veterans. So the first thing that we can do to provide support to our trans and non-binary veterans is we need to be screening for veteran status. So if you are working in an organization that supports veterans, then make sure that you're asking about trans identity. If you're working in an organization that supports trans and non-binary people, make sure that you're screening for veteran status, asking people about if they are a veteran or if they are currently active duty. More than 1 in 5, so over 20% of trans and non-binary people have served or are currently serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, which makes the U.S. Armed Forces the largest employer of trans and non-binary people. So because we know so many trans and non-binary people have experience working in the military and may be of veteran status, then we need to be asking about that. And screening for military service when providing health services can help providers to identify the applicable resources to support patient health. So, for example, if someone is a veteran, then they might have more resources available to them. They may have veteran specific resources available to them, but it can also help trans and non-binary veterans feel seen more holistically in the care that they are receiving and represented in their care, even when they're seeking services in non-veteran specific locations. The second thing that we want to do is we want to create a gender affirming health environment. So I mentioned, like, if you're supporting veterans, then we want to make sure that that environment is safe for trans and non-binary veterans, as well as non-trans veterans. So services should be gender affirming and culturally responsive to trans and non-binary people. This includes asking pronouns and current name, avoiding assumptions based on gender or gender expression, or how we perceive someone, revising forms to collect sexual orientation and gender identity information, which is becoming pretty much the health standard at this point, is to make sure that we're asking about these communities to see who we are serving, but also so that because we know that health disparities are higher in those communities compared to cisgender heterosexual communities. And then we also want to make sure that we're offering services to all clients, regardless of our perceived the way we perceive their gender or sex. So we don't want to, for example, offer cervical screenings only to people that we perceive as female or perceive as woman, we want to make sure that we're offering the opportunity for cervical screenings to everyone who has a cervix, which includes our service members or our veterans who are transmasculine and still have a cervix. The third thing we want to do is we want to listen to trans and non-binary veterans. So TGNB, trans non-binary veterans face unique barriers to care when seeking health services, like I mentioned before. So we know that the rates of health issues are higher. We know that for trans and non-binary people, especially trans and non-binary people that may have experienced stigma or stereotypes about gender identity while being actively in the military or once becoming a veteran, may have challenges with accessing veteran services or believe that they don't qualify for benefits. When we also know there's a historical military culture and a legislative culture around things like don't ask, don't tell. We know that trans and non-binary people have been dishonorably discharged, which would then prevent them from being able to access veteran services. But oftentimes that dishonorable discharge can be overturned now that we know that being trans is not a reason to dishonorably discharge someone. So there are unique barriers to accessing health services and accessing these resources that trans and non-binary veterans face compared to trans non-veterans and compared to cisgender veterans. So the specific combination of identities and the way that we treat these identities in military service, but also in our society as a whole, can create isolation and institutional mistrust. So we want to be collecting feedback and implementing recommendations from trans and non-binary veterans in the services that we are providing. So it's important that we're listening to the health needs of trans and non-binary veterans because we know so many trans and non-binary people have military experience, and we know that the health services need to be supportive of that specific community. The fourth thing that we want to do is we want to be linking to resources for veterans. So trans and non-binary veterans may not be aware that they can receive benefits and support from services that are designed for veterans specifically. So social support services such as the National Call Center for homeless veterans, which I will include the number for in the notes below, or the Veterans Crisis Line, which I will also include the number for, but you dial 988. Are available to trans and non-binary veterans. So they're available to anyone with a veteran status, including trans and non-binary people with a veteran status. And because we know that trans and non-binary people, trans and non-binary veterans specifically experience homelessness and mental health challenges at greater rates than trans and non-binary non-veterans or cisgender veterans, we want to make sure that we're linking folks to resources that can support them at the intersection of their identity, but also are specifically tailored to the unique health needs of veterans who are experiencing these overlapping needs around homelessness, around mental health challenges. Finally, number five, the fifth thing we want to do is we want to build relationships with trans and non-binary and minority veterans associations. So if we are serving trans and non-binary people, if we are serving veterans, we want to build relationships with these associations because for our clients who are trans and non-binary veterans, we want to be able to link them to services that can support the social service aspect of their identity, but also can help with advocacy. So for folks who have been dishonorably discharged, can help with advocacy to overturn that dishonorable discharge so that they are eligible for more resources and support. We also want to connect folks to people who are like them because that's how we build the support network. And so we want to connect trans and non-binary veterans to other trans and non-binary veterans so that we can support people holistically. So we can reach out to existing organizations that already have experience for supporting trans and non-binary veterans. So for example, the Minority Veterans of America organization, which is at minorityvets.org, and the Transgender American Veterans Association, or TAVA, which is at transveteran.org. Both of those services, both of those organizations have experience supporting trans and non-binary veterans, supporting minority veterans. And so they are uniquely positioned to provide support to our trans and non-binary veteran clients. Referring the clients to these services, the services designed by and for minority veterans, can ensure that trans and non-binary veterans, especially trans and non-binary veterans of color, receive culturally responsive resources and support. So again, to recap the top five, or the five things we can do, is we can screen for veteran status. So if we are serving trans and non-binary people, we should be screening for veteran status. We can create a gender affirming health environment. So if we are serving veterans, we should make sure that we are also being affirming of trans and non-binary people in those spaces. We need to listen to transgender and non-binary veterans, take that feedback and implement that feedback so the health services are responsive to the health needs of trans and non-binary veterans. We need to link resources, or link veterans to resources, link trans and non-binary veterans to resources for veterans, because there are lots of assumptions about what folks might be eligible for or not. And a lot of those services are uniquely positioned to support veterans in our communities. And then we need to also build relationships with trans and non-binary and minority veterans associations, because those organizations are also uniquely positioned in order to provide support for trans and non-binary people and minorities at the intersection of gender identity and veteran status. So I encourage folks, if this has been helpful for you, first of all, like, if you're catching this live, go ahead and put a hashtag live in the chat. Let me know any questions that you have. If you're catching this on the replay, go ahead and put your questions in the chat as well, and I will be reviewing those and answering those questions. If you found this helpful, please like the YouTube channel for Ask Miss Jai Live, and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can keep getting information like this. Also, feel free to share this information, share this video with other health serving organizations, share this video with folks who are providing services to trans and non-binary people and folks who are providing services to veterans. And then feel free to sign up for our mailing list. So you can go to my website at www.askmissjai.com, scroll to the bottom and sign up for the mailing list. I send resources to your email box every week with our weekly shout out newsletter. And I also announce all sorts of upcoming events, trainings, things that you can pre-register for, things you can register for ahead of the general public. So please check out that mailing list at www.askmissjai.com. Again, my name is Miss Jai. I'm the host of Ask Miss Jai Live. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns, and I'm so grateful for your time and energy today in watching this video. I hope that this has been helpful, and I want to thank you for taking the time to engage with us. I want to thank you for investing in the health and well-being of trans and non-binary communities. And until next time, stay safe and much love.